I'm Julie Herman of Jaybird Quilts and Lazy Girl Designs, and welcome back to the Gravity Sew Along. Now that we have done all of our cutting for month 4, we are going to begin piecing our block. If you have not yet seen the cutting video, I suggest you start there. The link is in the caption below. And these beautiful strip cut diamonds are going to add a lot of movement to the block. I really, really love this block. And it is assembled in 2 large triangles, and then each large triangle is broken up into a bottom and a top. Directions for this are on page 19 of your book. And we're going to get started with the top. I suggest sewing the right side and then the left, but you could do it in whichever order you prefer. I'm going to take the right and go ahead and flip it on my piece. And I did not cut my diamonds blunt here. Sometimes you'll see that I do. I don't find that it's necessary for this block because I have a sharp point here. Everything will line up just fine. So I'm just going to simply get those lined up. And so onto my little scraps, I'll be able to show you what it looks like. There we go. And this is a perfect opportunity to use my seam roller rather than having to turn my iron on, because I do need to press this a little bit before I can put my next triangle on. I love using my Violet Craft seam roller. It really works well for situations like this. So now I'm going to grab my other triangle and flip that right sides together. And the blunt is going to line up here just like it did on the other one. And now my point is going to line up with my dog ear that was created from my other triangle. So lots of different places to double check our alignment and make sure that we're good to go. You want to make sure that my pressed open seam of my strip set doesn't flip. This is a good place, if needed, to use a stiletto. Now I have the base of my block, and again, 3 pieces, but instead of 2 triangles and 1 diamond, now we have 2 diamonds and 1 triangle. So I like to begin by sewing my triangle to this diamond and then adding this one. So let's slide this one out of the way. And since grain isn't really going to matter long term because all the blocks are going to go together, instead of keeping my straight up grain at the bottom, which is what we would naturally think to do, I like to turn my triangle at this point. So then I'm going to have a sharp point to a sharp point and a blunt to a flat side here. Just going to go ahead and line that up. And as you've seen before, I don't really use pins when I'm just putting 2 pieces together. I will use pins at the next stage, and I'll show you that in a moment. So let's cut the top part of our block off and put our little scrap in again. And again, this is a good opportunity to use my Violet Craft seam roller because I need to press this flat before I can add this piece. Just simply going to flip it over, just kind of finger press. And I don't need to worry about pressing the whole seam. I really just need to make sure that that area that is going to intersect with my diamond is pressed nice and flat. And then I'm going to flip it over, and my point of my diamond is going to line up with the point created by the dog ear of my other diamond. And then down here, I am going to sew to the valley. If you would like, you can go ahead and blunt additional corners like this one on your triangle. If that would help you to line that up, that is an option. So let me show you what the top and bottom half look like. I've already finished and pressed them for the other half of the block. So this is the top, which is what we were working on with the 2 triangles. And this is the bottom that we just completed. And the next stage, or the next step I should say, is to sew the 2 of these together into 1 large triangle. And what we really care about here more than the outsides is we care that this point lines up with this point, because that's where your eye is going to go. So what we're going to do is a hang pin. And I showed you this back in month 2, but I'm going to go ahead and show it to you again. It's one of my favorite techniques for helping to make sure things line up properly. So what we're going to do is take our 2 pieces, put them right sides together, and we're going to take our first pin, and we're going to insert it. Let me make sure you can see really good. right here at the point where everything comes together. And if you flip it to the other side, you should see I'm right at that point of the purple piece. And then I'm going to go in here right at the point that is created right there. And I'm going to hug these pieces together and let that pin hang there, hence the name hang pin. Now, I do want to make sure that I keep this pin perpendicular to the fabric. If I shift things over to the right or to the left, that pin moves, and then my pieces are not aligned how I want them to be. So it's very important that for right now, that pin stays perpendicular to your fabric. And then what you're going to do, since you can't really sew with a pin into the bed of your sewing machine, is you're going to take 2 additional pins and use one on either side of where you just did the hang pin to hold everything in place until we can put a few stitches in. So now that I have those 2 in place, go ahead and remove my hang pin. Now I could sew the length of the seam, but what if I'm off? What if I have a mistake? Then I have to take out all the stitches the whole length. So what I like to do at this point is just sew a couple stitches before, after that point, just about, maybe half an inch before, after, so an inch total, sometimes even a little less. Open it, we'll check it, we'll see how it is. As long as all is good, we'll sew the length of the seam. But if things are off, which does happen sometimes, I can go ahead and just take out a few stitches instead of having to take out the entire length of my piece. So I'm just going to start right on my piece, and I'm going to go nice and slow and use a stiletto. And I want to make sure that my needle goes right down at that point, so that even if right now this seam allowance is a little too generous or a little too scant, what I want is my needle to go in at that point, because then I'm going to have that perfect point and I can go ahead and accommodate or compensate for my imperfect seam allowance as I go. Because the reality is we're just not all perfect and things get wonky along the way, but this kind of can help us get back on track and keep our points exactly where we want them to be. So let's see what this looks like. That is pretty spot on. Looks like this one is about 1 thread down compared to this one, but honestly, you'd have to really get up close to see that. I mean, that purple line looks perfect across. So I am quite happy with that. So you can go ahead and add extra pins now if you'd like. I don't, for something this size. If it was larger, I would. I'm just going to go ahead and sew the length of the seam. I'm not going to take the stitches out. I'm going to sew right on top of them and leave them. Just kind of think of them as like basting. Make sure my pressed open seams don't flip again. There we go. That looks great. So I will go ahead and repeat. I will press this and sew these together in the same way that I just did this. And then sew the 2 halves together. And when I'm sewing the 2 halves together, I'm not doing any hang pins. I'm just going to match this up, match this up. You can do the thread pinning to kind of stitch just there first, make sure everything's good. Take it off, sew the length of that seam, and then repeat with my green fabrics. Thanks for watching. If this video was helpful for you, be sure to like it, leave a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. Show us your progress on your gravity blocks in our Facebook group. We'd love to see how you're coming along with your quilt. The link to the Facebook group is below. I'll be back here in the next video to show you how to do your cutting for block 5.